Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPhone 11 Pro Max has been my main device over the past couple of weeks. I've used it every single day, all day long, and I've really been enjoying using it compared to the XS Max. But I wanted to go over the good and the bad. There are some great things about it, and there's a couple bad things. Not as many as maybe last year, but there are a few. So let's go over those. Now, the first thing you need to know is that the iPhone 11 Pro and the 11 Pro Max are identical in every single way, except for the screen size of 5.8 versus 6.5 inches, and also the battery capacity. The iPhone 11 Pro Max has a very large battery in it, and it will last a little bit longer than the 11 Pro. Now, the first good thing is the display. The display is incredibly bright. It's 800 nits average brightness, and then will peak out at 1200 nits if you're trying to watch an HDR movie, for example. The display looks incredible. It's nice and vibrant. It's super color accurate, and it's easy to see in sunlight. You'll see I have this wallpaper that's actually very dark in some areas and light in others, and I can still see it fine in bright sunlight. So that's a really great thing on this new phone, is it's just super bright. It's brighter than the XS Max, not by a ton, but it is brighter. Now, something people ask me about all the time is PWM, or pulse width modulation. And PWM is the way an OLED display controls brightness. And Apple is using that here, but they've increased the rate fast enough where it doesn't bother my eyes anymore. So it's at about 290 hertz. It's flickering fast enough that it seemingly doesn't bother me at all, like previous generations of Apple's OLEDs. I actually have a hard time looking at them. It causes me to be nauseated and gives me headaches. So this year, it doesn't do that. I'm happy to report that, and that's definitely a positive for me. The next positive thing for me is build quality. The build quality on this phone seems better to me. It's stainless steel around the outside edge, but also there's no sharp edges like there was on the XS Max for me. This was a sharp lip right here, so it was really sharp around the edges, and overall, it just didn't feel built as well as the iPhone X, for example. So this year, we're back to very high quality. I know some people didn't have that issue, but I did on a couple different phones. So it's much better this year, and they've always been high quality, but this just feels even better. Now, the phone is constructed of glass, which it's been that way since the iPhone 8, and this year it's got a matte finish on the back, and I actually find this to be a good thing. And the reason I say that is it's less slippery if you're not using a case. I think it's great for me. I know some people think it's more slippery. I actually find it to be less slippery. So the front is the same, the back is less slippery for me if you're not using a case. Of course, if you're using a case, it's going to be even better. The next positive thing for me is battery life. Battery life is easily 3 to 4 hours better on the iPhone 11 Pro Max than it was on my XS Max. With regular software, if I'm not using betas, it's definitely an incredible jump when it comes to battery. And that's thanks to a much larger battery. So we're seeing that not only due to the new chipset inside, but also the battery itself. And that leads me over to the new A13 Bionic. That's another major positive. It's incredibly fast. The A13 Bionic is just super fast all of the time. There's no issues as far as scrolling. Frame rates are super smooth, as you can see here. And because this video is in 4K 60, I think you can appreciate just the smoothness and the speed overall. Now, a lot of people ask me how reception is on the new phones, and I'm happy to report it's much better for me than the XS Max. Now, the XS Max reception-wise was okay for me, but this is a big leap, especially with speeds and also Wi-Fi speeds, now that it supports Wi-Fi 6. So I'm happy to report that next year we'll probably see Qualcomm modems or some variant, since Apple bought Intel patents this time around, but we're stuck with Intel phones in this particular generation. Now, other than the major positive of battery life, we also have incredible cameras this year. And these cameras are so good, I've been using them for video. In fact, I'm using them for the entire video while shooting this. So right now, the forward-facing camera is what I'm recording with, and the rest of the video is recorded with the rear-facing camera of the Pros. So they're just incredible cameras. But let's take a closer look at some of the features and see what the photos look like. Now, the cameras this year is what really makes this phone stand out. Apple has done a terrific job of making them incredibly good. So you'll see I'm zoomed out using the ultra-wide. I can go to 1x or 2x. Back out, and the 1x and 2x are stabilized, and they're incredibly stable when walking, and I'll show you that in a moment. But if we go back out to the ultra-wide, it's actually so wide that if I slide my finger up from the bottom, it's in the frame, even though it's not near the lens. So it's an incredibly wide shot and looks really good if you're trying to capture a ton of information. When you're in the Photos app, it's really interesting because it's stitching together the ultra wide and the 1x camera. So if I zoom in, you'll see now it's stitching together the 2x and the 1x camera. If I zoom back out to ultra wide, then it stops going over the actual frame. So it's kind of an interesting way to see what you can see in other lenses if you want to zoom in and out. It is a little bit difficult to frame though. So if you want to change that, hit this little arrow here, and now we have options for things like 16:9. So if I want to go 1x to 16:9, now I can see the whole thing. And it makes it a little bit easier to frame when you're going between 4:3, 16:9, maybe for a thumbnail on YouTube. And then you have some other options here with filters and time lapse and flash as well. Apple this year has really improved stabilization. So you'll see I'm at 1x, just walking down a trail, and it seems to be very, very stable. I can zoom into 2x and it's still pretty stable. It's going to get a little more wobbly, but back out to 1x. And then if I switch to ultra wide, the stabilization shuts off. So now I'm at ultra wide, and because it's such a wide shot, you don't really need a stabilized lens. It's pretty stable overall. Now, when you're in an environment that's dark enough, a little icon will show up on the iPhone, and this indicates the new night mode. And Apple has added this to the new iPhones so that you can capture more light and process better photos when it's dark out. And you could still use the flash here, but night mode, you can activate it when the icon shows up. Otherwise, there's no way to activate it manually, but it just shows up as it gets darker out. And then you have some options for exposure times or your aperture. So depending on if you're holding it by hand or if it's on a tripod, this time will vary based on motion it's sensing using its sensors. Now let's take a look at a very dark environment, and I'll show you what this can actually do. Now we're in a dark environment and there's almost no ambient light, and the iPhone actually knows that it's dark and also knows that it's on a tripod. So it allows us to turn the capture time up to 30 seconds for maximum exposure. So let's go ahead and hit the button to record the photo, and you'll see it's very dark, and as it starts to gather light, it starts to expose on the iPhone screen itself. And this is really interesting to watch, and the maximum time is 30 seconds. And it's pretty amazing the results you can get because it will get details that I can't see. For example, you'll see there's a small white box there. That's actually an iPhone box, but I can't see that with my eyes without any lights on. So I can't make out any detail on it. I just know there's a faint shadow that looks like a box in the background. And so I can't see it with my own eyes. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at it. So there is the photo that it actually was able to capture. It was able to capture the word iPhone, and I can't see that word at all in this particular environment. Even with these screens on, there's not enough light for me to see it. I can only see that LED that's right there, and that's about it. There's not a whole lot of light in this room. It's pretty amazing what it can do, and this is not the ideal situation, but this gives you an idea of what it can do. Now here's the exact same background. I haven't moved anything, but this is what it looked like before I turned all of the lights off. So you'll see it did a pretty good job of capturing it overall. Take a look at a couple other photos that were captured at night. Now, Apple has finally included a fast charger in the box with the phone. This is an 18-watt fast charger similar to that of the iPad Pro. It's USB-C to Lightning and will charge the phone about 50% in 30 minutes. Now, the last positive is the speakers. The speakers are really good on this phone. You've got the forward-facing speaker on the top and then the down-firing speaker on the bottom, and combined, they have a really nice sound. It's a wider sound, as Apple calls it, and it's just better overall. It's really, really loud, and I'm glad they've just made it better and better. I didn't think you could get much louder than the XS Max, but these definitely feel louder to me. And then I go to battery health. You'll see I have 100% battery health. Now, this isn't really fair since this is only a few months old. Now, let's move on to the bad or the negative things about this phone. And the first thing is they've removed 3D Touch. Now, I know a lot of you are not going to be bothered by that, but if you are familiar with using 3D Touch and like to use it, they've removed the way it works. It's now a long press or haptic touch. And while that doesn't bother me too much, it is a little bit slower and it's just not as nice. It feels like they've removed a feature, although they have added battery life because they were able to make the display thinner, and probably it's for future designs since it's hard to implement that pressure layer underneath. Now, the next bad thing is the price. The price continues to start at $1,000 and goes all the way to about $1,500 in the United States. That can be much higher overseas, and it's a problem for a lot of people. Now, of course, there's the iPhone 11, which is a good option for most people, but if you want that better display and that ultra-wide camera along with a telephoto lens, you'll have to opt for at least $1,000 plus, or at least wait another year until they come down in price. So that's going to be a big negative for a lot of people. And finally, while this may or may not be a negative for some people, they're probably going to redesign this phone next year. Many people are expecting a full redesign with possibly a smaller notch, maybe even a larger battery or similar size battery, and then maybe even an iPhone 4 type style. So if you want the latest and greatest, you may want to wait until next year if you have a XS Max or a 10, because the full redesign seems to be a 3-year cycle, and this is the 3rd iteration of this phone. So that may be a problem for you. Otherwise, I highly recommend it. So that's it for the good and bad of the iPhone 11 Pro and Pro Max. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I still recommend it to anyone looking for an upgrade. If you love the iPhone ecosystem or iOS ecosystem, it's only going to get better from here on out. With Deep Fusion coming to the cameras, later with 13.2, or it may be out by the time you're watching this, it just gets better and better and less buggy over time as far as updates are concerned. But let me know your experience with it in the comments below, and if you're picking one up, or maybe you're going to hold off until next year. Thanks so much for watching, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe and hit that notification bell if you'd like to see more of these videos as soon as they're released. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.